Welcome to today's podcast. We've got the Old Paratrooper Podcast. We've got Chris Binch, former paratrooper, close protection officer, and now a full-time serving firefighter and an absolute brilliant podcast host. But there's my little spiel. Chris, why don't you reel off a quick 30 seconds about yourself and then we'll just sort of dive into your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So, former paratrooper, served for 7 years in the 2nd Battalion, the Parachute Regiment, left in 2004 when all the close protection kind of kicked off. Went over to Iraq for 6 years, worked for 3 or 4 different close protection companies. Had all sorts of fun out there, as you can imagine. 2010, jumped on the anti-piracy for 3 years. And in between that, I did bits of surveillance and unlicensed boxing at heavyweight and stuff like that. Joined the fire service 2013, so coming up to around sort of 12, 13 years now in the fire service. Yeah.
Nice. It's pretty varied career, sort of in a sort of adrenaline rushed sort of way. A typical sort of squaddy route, I sort of find. But going back then, what actually made you join the Paras? Have you heard of them? Or were you like a lot of rest were just like, you sort of just got pushed into it?
No, you see, I've got a family links to the military. My uncle was in various units and you know, granddads and uncles kind of going back to sort of the 50s and 60s and stuff. So I didn't really know what I really wanted to do. I always wanted to be a firefighter from a very young age. Yeah, from a very young age, due to a friend at school, his dad was a firefighter. But I also, the military as well, it was about a 50-50 split. I didn't know what I was going to go in. But I didn't say I had a troubled upbringing, but I had a kind of got involved in violence from like my early teens up until sort of 16, 17. And it was a bit of an ultimatum really from my dad. He was like, look, you either join the military or you're probably going to end up in prison. And I know that sounds like a bit of a cliche, as a lot of soldiers end up in them sort of situations. But I ended up getting glassed in the face. I had 17, 18 stitches around my eye, broken nose, fractured jaw. And basically, my old man was like, look, you've got to change something or you know, it's going to go wrong. So I'd done a week at 15 with the Worcestershire Foresters, which are now the Mercian Regiment, I believe.
Yeah. Yes, they are.
Back then, they were called the Woofers. And I excelled at this kind of week look at life thing up in Sherwood Forest, where I now live. And yeah, I excelled in it. And they wanted me to join their unit. And it was my best mate who... that I've known since the age of 7. I talk about him a lot. And he was like, on the day, he was like, why don't we join this unit called the Paras? And I was like, well, what do they do? And he was like, well, pretty much like the rest of the infantry, you just jump out of planes. So I was a bit like, oh, well, that sounds quite cool. Let's do that. So we both went and joined up. He went... we got split up, but he went at 1 para. I went up going to depot and going to 2 para, and he's just finished his time now in the SBS. So he unusual route for para reg to go down the SBS route.
Yes, it is.
But yeah, that's how I ended up getting in. Like,
it's funny that so many people join the services, like the military, British Army especially, from such crap background. I've actually just listened to Mark Billingham's book on the Audible. So I don't know the guy. Just seen him on TV and Instagram, and he had such a troubled background, a bit like you, a bit of a fighter, and then's done so well in life, and you can actually make it. But I'd be interested to know, did you join Paras when they were at Aldershot training or Catterick? They would have been at Aldershot when you joined, wouldn't they?
No. They kind of finished training at Aldershot, and someone did tell me this the other day. I think 92, 93 was the last intake that went through Aldershot, and I went through in 97, so I did Lichfield. For my basic, and then phase 2 is at Catterick, and I believe it's all the whole training now for Power Reg is up at Catterick now.
Yeah, and they're not just your standard infantry. That's what makes me laugh when you're so naive that young. Yeah, they're just infantry that jump out of planes. I remember when I did P Company when I first joined 7, and you see all the Joes up there, and they're just getting thrashed and hammered. And then we had a few lads who, for whatever reason, didn't make it through Paras, didn't want to. Couldn't pass the basic, come across to 7, and then did P Company that way and served in the Airborne Forces. And the stories they would just tell you. I'm sure you've got some cracking stories from when you was in basic.
I'll
tell you one I've got. It's just sorry. We was on the top field in Catterick, you might not know it because it might have been before your time, but the football field, it's where you do all the warm-ups. And para-reg lads, the Joes, were running around basically the field with logs above the reds, bit of log training. And one guy at the back just wasn't keeping up. So his section commander's screaming at him. And then he's like, get out there. And then just kidney digs him. Bearing in mind, this lad's got a log above his head. And you get a kidney dig. You can only see this going downhill. But that was just like every day for them. I'd happily admit it. When I was in training, 16 at Harrogate, we did get hit, punched, but it turned me into the person I am today. And I joined in 2006. You were 97. So, and it had changed quite a bit from then. But I just remember seeing that and I was like, that's not your standard training, just the way they were treated. But the best blokes I've ever worked with.
Oh, no, but it's good to hear, and there's inter kind of regiment banter between all the units, Marines, 7, 9, all that kind of stuff. But I think if you actually sat most blokes down, power edge blokes, and asked them, they have a lot of mutual respect for the guys that are 7 power and 9 squadron and stuff like that, and it's the same with the Marines as well. There's that camaraderie, but we have a mutual respect of the training that they go through that enables them to go on, become Royal Marine Commandos. So. But yeah, no, I had this conversation earlier today actually with someone about depot in 97. I remember guys coming out of the office after being beasted with bus noses and, bus lips and stuff. And was it called for? It's difficult to say. We live in a different world now. But again, if you messed up that was something safety critical, you'd expect to dig because that's how you learn.
I don't condone bullying. I don't just fill in someone in, which you have seen section commanders complete thingy. But I think, like you said, if you're on the ranges and a complete safety issue and you get a small kidney dig or kick to the back of the head, don't do that again. I'm not going to lie, most soldiers would prefer that to an ag turning up at 10 o'clock at night doing a show parade.
Absolutely.
Or getting charged a bit of losing, a day's pay because you've done I'd rather take a punch. But,
I think we had some Sergeant Majors, mate, in battalion, the legendary Scout Scott, that you probably would have heard the name bound around. He was like a legend within Power Edge. I think he's still in. I think he's been in 40 years. I think he's a captain or with 4 para now. But the man is a legend, and the people that will see this will know what I'm talking about. And he'd ask you, what do you want, face, gut, or do you want a fine? if you're in the office, and most would go, right, I'll take a stomach punch. And he was an horrible man, but it saved you 50 quid or whatever it was of getting fined, so charge.
We had in training something called an itchy head. It was either an ag or an itchy head, and it was basically either their fist or whatever they had in their hand. You just put your head down and took it to the top of your head. Normally it was a thermal flask or the fist. And I'd much rather that and then getting free show parades or a fine, because at 10 o'clock at night I want to be in bed. I don't want to be standing out in the cold, someone inspecting me. So I remember just 16-year-old just getting a whack to the top of the head. But it wasn't like to the point where they're going to make you concussed, but enough to hurt and get the point across.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And like I say, that's just the way it was. And I like to think, rightly or wrongly, that's part of the British Army training. And I think it'd still be the same now. I mean, I've been out 21 years, I think it's coming up to now. So yeah. I wouldn't like to comment, but I can imagine the standards are still there and that sort of thing still happens. It has to. It's part of the kind of the culture, if you like.
Yeah, it doesn't happen as much, I will say. I was an instructor back in 2015 at Pirbright. And it's definitely changed a lot, but they do try and uphold the standards as much as possible.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. While you served then, so would you have done sort of Iraq, a couple of sort of exercises within Kenya? What did you sort of do within your 7 years?
Yeah, so I was in a busy time, 97 to 2004.
Northern Ireland as well, sorry to interrupt.
Yes. Yeah, three tours of Northern Ireland. And then Afghanistan was one of the later. It was the first tour of Afghanistan, 2001, 2002. I did Sierra Leone in 99 and then the Macedonia tour as well. So I got 6 operational tours in 7 years, plus the Belize trip, plus the Canada trip, and your standard kind of TESXs and stuff like that. So it was a busy time, to be fair.
Oh, nice. Yeah, what did you think then? So you would have done, the proper nice tours at the beginning where it was, I wouldn't say nice, a little bit more relaxed in the sense of when I did it in 2012, it was sort of, I'll happily admit, it was dying down a bit. and they cared more about your sideburns and you shaving every day than your actual tactics. Sometimes it was like you're walking around, sort your sideburns out, get your sleeves up. As I remember the old alley days, it's what made me want to join. You'd see him on the news with a t-shirt on, body armour, cutting around on patrol, big tashes, handlebar tashes. Just the things that I don't know, when I think about the army, that's what I think, just get the job done. Obviously you need discipline, looking smart. I sometimes pictures of Power Reg, big tattoos on their arm, handlebars.
Yeah, well,
that's how made me want to join the army.
Yeah, there was a lot of that when I joined, because I come from the 97. Again, I talk about this quite a lot. There was still a lot of Falklands guys knocking around, that were coming towards the end of their career. Obviously, the Falklands being in 82, 97, you're still not completed the 22 years service yet. So a lot of Falklands, a lot of moustache, a lot of testosterone.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was good, but I'm really honest. I was in for a busy time, but the tours were nothing like what the guys that went on the kind of Herrick tours and the Helmland Province tours and stuff like that, and they were quiet. I say quiet. There was a lot of potential. They were good for soldiering, bouncing into Sierra Leone after being in Tenerife 24 hours later to patrol in Freetown.
No.
That's what happened to me in Sierra Leone, with all this, potential for it to kick off was interesting. So yeah, it was exciting times, definitely. But I never, I don't know. You can only be in the certain time that you're in, And if I knew Afghan were coming, and the subsequent tours of Afghan 2006 onwards, it may have swayed me to maybe stay in. But I was getting a bit bored of rotations. I was getting a bit, and I got a kind of, which we'll probably come on to. I got wind of a different market over in Iraq, so.
Well, yeah, we'll come on to that now. You would have left at a time, so I joined in 2006, and obviously Herrick was just properly kicking off.
Yeah.
I remember being in Harrogate and instructors were like losing mates, and you just see them in the office crying. You're like, Jesus Christ, yeah, this is what we're getting into. And then a couple of years into my career, lads were just sort of leaving because obviously the close protection was the money they were offering. You just couldn't get anywhere else, and obviously the possibilities as well of traveling and just doing sort of working in a close knit team. But yeah, how did you find close? What's the difference between being in the military and close protection? Like,
it was an extension of the military, really. Obviously it was full of military guys, but it was a closed market up until the kind of second Iraq war. It was a market that were purely for kind of SF, in small groups. You had like the Fayad's family that are teams on, and it was very, very, or celebrity bodyguarding, which again was reserved predominantly for Hereford boys or kind of SPS guys. So when the second Iraq war kicked off, it opened up the market, and all of a sudden there was this, niche market for guys to go and sort of get involved. And I was very lucky that I knew a few guys that had gone on selection and passed and gone to 2-2 and were like, look, this is coming. They didn't just tell me, they kind of told a lot of the lads, and rumour got around. And I, luckily managed to get myself out of the army. I was applying for the fire service actually as I was leaving, and I got through to the interview stage of the fire service, and I failed miserably at 24 years of age, and I decided to then go for the close protection that I'd got wind of, and yeah, I ended up heading out there. It didn't end too well on the first job. I've told this story quite a few times. I was out there a week, and then I chinned an ex-Australian SES bloke that was working for the same company and ended up getting sacked. So it was not my finest moment, but in my defence, he was a bully, and he was.
I was going to say, did you have a reason? So.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. He got sacked later down the line for bullying. He was just a bit of a. And look, coming out at 24, I make no bones about it. I'm a different person now. I'm a very mellowed person. Back then, I was very hot-headed. Punch first, ask questions later. It's not the right thing to do, but that's the way it was. That's the way I was. Like I said, I don't even recognise that kind of human anymore. But yeah, he was giving it the large and giving me some stick and fronted me, and I didn't give him the opportunity to do anything else, so I just gave him a shoeing. Yeah, like I say, But was it right? I don't know. But the guy was a bit of a dick. We made peace before I got flown out of there. But yeah, it didn't start off very well, Craig, to be fair.
That's pretty good then, because CP, the circuit, is basically who you know, not what you know, isn't it? It's very close knit. Reputation gets around. So for you to do that, would have got around really quick. Your name must have shot around. So to be able to stay on the circuit after that is pretty decent in itself. That speaks for yourself, of why you did it and who you are as a person. Because I know, I've never done the circuit, but I've looked into it. I've got a lot of friends in it. It's, you know, if you're a bit of a shit person, or you've got a bad reputation within the military and you come out, it's going to go around, and you're very unlikely going to start getting less and less jobs. So for you to stay on the circuit for as long as you did after you did that shows who you are, and, you know, how good you actually are, and you had possible reason to do it within reason.
Yeah, I've never really looked at it like that, but I suppose you're right. I went out there on a recommendation. I went for an interview for that company, and the guardsman that was in the office in London, ex-guardsman that was behind the desk that was doing the recruiting, wouldn't actually take me on. He was like, because you're too young, we don't take people under 30 for insurance purposes. And he actually went out, when I spoke to him and asked who my OC was, I told him the name, and he went, I went through Sandhurst with him. He went, give me a minute. Went out the room and gave him a ring. Came back in and went, he says, you're a gleaming bloke, you know, you're a good soldier, you're a top bloke. He says, when can you fly out? And then I went and did what I did, and he was very happy with me. So, it is what it is. But no, I had a couple of months back home after that, you know, and I was finding it a little bit difficult, because obviously word does get around. But then I knew a few guys in another company that knew I was a nice enough bloke, and I got taken, you know, I think I was back about 7-8 weeks, and then I got on with another company called Blue Hackle, that were in its infancy at the time, and I was involved with really kind of one of the first teams on the ground with them, kind of setting up, training local nationals in sort of weapons, first aid, that kind of stuff. So yeah, interesting times. Cutting around Baghdad in soft-skin vehicles with a beard and a shemag. I used to travel up and down Route Irish maybe 5, 6, 7 times a day in a soft-skin Ford Mondeo, which was classed as probably the most dangerous road in the world. Totally blasé, just with a rusty AK-47. So it was, the early days were definitely a bit wild, wild west, you know.
Yeah. Oh, nice. So people just don't realise, like, what actually is going on, what you're actually doing about it. And then at that age as well, just so like, yeah, I'm in Iraq driving around in a Ford Mondeo, but you're just, I think coming out of the military and that, you're so confident within yourself, and you're possibly your ability as well. It's you don't really think about the dangers. Whatever.
Yeah, you don't, and you're right, and you know, and I look back now. And the thought of doing what I did in my early 20s. And no, God, no, all the money in the world couldn't pay me. And, you know, I still do now, obviously quite a dangerous job, but I take that in my stride. And I think it's a military thing, you know. You adapt to your surroundings, that's what we do, and you're just a little bit blasé, because if you thought too much about what you were doing, if in a dangerous career, you'd never do it. You'd lay awake at night, sleepless nights, stressing about it. You just have to crack on and deal with what it kind of throws at you at the time, and that's where our training comes in. You know, that's why, you know, we do what we do. You know, you just kind of adapt to the situation without sounding a bit cheesy. God, I'm reverting back to like when I were in, you know, adapt and overcome and all that stuff. Good sayings that they used to say.
No, yeah, definitely. Would you sort of recommend close protection to people now you've done it? You know, a lot of guys do still look to leave the military to get into it. I don't think it's as popular as it used to be, but would you recommend it?
You know, it was great at the time, but I it's been said before, and it's not my statement, it's been said by a few people, that period of time, probably 2003, towards the end, or when the war was ongoing, up until maybe 2010, 2011, was like the golden era. You know, you were covered under the umbrella of the US government. There was a lot of money thrown at it. Wages were good. Rotations were good. You had teams of able, you know, British soldiers, American soldiers, South Africans and stuff like that are trained to the standard you'd expect. And then the Iraqi government started to come back into a power, and then obviously mixed teams, the money started dropping. And then, like everything, much of a goodness, you kind of, once something's really good and it gets popular, it kind of gets a little bit ruined by the standard and quality. So everyone was getting out, and not everyone but not everyone should have been working out there. I've come across some absolutely diabolical soldiers working out there from all sorts of units, and that is my own unit as well, that
They all slip through the net.
There. Yeah, of course they do, and I was really fortunate to work for 3 very, very good companies out there that had high standards. I mean, the last company I worked for was a company called Aegis that probably people have heard of. You had an induction course, you have to pass fitness tests, you had a uniform, you had range days. There was a lot of stuff, and a lot of the military guys shied away from that sort of thing because they were like, well, I've left the military, I don't want to be doing that sort of thing. Whereas I like that because it had them standards. But answer to your question, it is a good environment if you can get in, but it is very much who you know. And obviously it's infiltrated with girls and boys all over the place. So it's a bit difficult to get. It's certainly harder than in my day to get into.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. And now you go from that into the fire service, which is your dream job since you was a child, you said. Obviously did a lot better in the interview process than you did back in 2004. Actually made it in, and then 12 years in there, like, you must have seen some pretty horrific but maybe possibly incredible stuff as well. A firefighter's just such a broad spectrum of what you can actually do. How have you found it? Has it lived up to your expectations?
Yeah, it has. I love the fire. So prior to that, I obviously did the anti-piracy and stuff.
Anti-piracy as well.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, I did that for 3 years, but that was fairly uneventful. I got to travel around a lot with that. And I've been in some weird and wonderful places. I got stranded in Madagascar for 5 days, found myself in a nightclub where the doorman had an Uzi strung around his neck. That is a true story. Everything I tell, because people know
I believe
me,
you.
I've got nothing. It's just some of the stories seem a little bit bizarre and a little bit bonkers, but I can assure you they're all true.
Let's go on to that then. How did you get stranded in Madagascar and end up in a nightclub with a security guard with an Uzi?
I was on a transit with 3 guys from the French Foreign Legion, because the company I worked for out of South Korea was the kind of main guy was ex-French Foreign Legion. So they were kind of really heavy with French Foreign Legion guys. And he was a Moroccan guy, Yusuf, absolutely top bloke. He was actually on the ground in Somalia when Black Hawk Down happened with the Legion, kind of off the record. So yeah, very experienced Legion guy. Spent 25 years in the French Foreign Legion, and we ended up getting stranded because of bad weather in Madagascar in this little town, not even like a port town. And then obviously, as soldiers do, it was like, well, let's find somewhere to go and have a beer. So out we wandered, and there was some kind of French speaking there, so they were able to speak the dialogue, and I'm just following along like, yeah, whatever, I'll go wherever, I don't care. And we ended up going into a nightclub, and I was the only white person in the nightclub. It was absolutely full of local nationals, local natives, as you were. And yeah, the doorman had an Uzi slung around his neck. And I said to the guy that spoke French, Yusuf, I was a bit like, well, what's that for? And he spoke to him and he went, oh, it's to protect us, not for anyone else. So I was a bit like, okay. A few beers later, I forgot all about it. And it was typical, we'll be all right. British military mentality is a bit like, we'll be fine. So, yeah, some weird and wonderful places. I spent a lot of time in Sri Lanka, Oman, Tanzania, kind of all over the place, really. So, and I actually, I tried for the fire service 3 attempts over 10 years.
No way.
And the last attempt, I got past the whole process, past the interview. Don't know how, because it was a terrible I don't interview brilliantly, as you could probably tell. No, I'm joking.
Right, mate.
I hadn't done particularly well on the interview, but I got through, and they said, right, you will wait until a course comes up. And then I was floating off the coast of Dubai on one of those kind of armories that they had, on the anti-piracy, waiting to pick up a ship coming out of Dubai or wherever it was from. And I got an email saying, oh, you've not been successful, we're not running another course. So I'd passed the whole process and they weren't running a course. You got to reapply in a year. So I was like, right. And then the opportunity come up while I was on that armory to take a 10-week ship. And I thought, well, it's good money. I'll take the 10-week ship. I was the only English speaker on the ship for 10 weeks.
So that's a tough 10 weeks.
Oh God, yeah. I'm comfortable in my own company, but 10 weeks when no one else speaks English, I was a bit like, wow. About 7 weeks in, I got an email, and then I ended up making a phone call with a sat phone to a family member and said, they've changed their mind. They're running a third course and you're on it. You've got to get back for your medical and everything else. So I had to bluff my case and end up paying a larger sum of money in the realms of, a few grand to get off the ship in Saudi Arabia. So I ended up getting off in Saudi and, flying home, and I made it back for the medical and the final bit of the fire service process with about 20 hours to spare. So yeah, I ended up getting in. So it was a bit, it was lucky, a bit of this and that, but it was quite a lucky.
Yeah. That's a proper. I love that mentality though. I find soldiers are really good at it when they leave the military. Sort of, they just don't give up. Like to fail something 3 times. Well, sorry, pass on the 3rd time, but get rejected on the 3rd time as well, even though you've passed it all. And then you go on a ship, and then you have to spend thousands. I don't many people would have the mentality to go through that over and over again, and then finally pass, and they'd be like, right, I'm completely done now. And then to get a phone call, a lot of people be like, I'm on the ship, I ain't coming back. Like, you've messed me around.
Yeah, well, I do things in threes, because I actually did, and I've said this before quite openly. I used to keep this a little bit of I was ashamed of it initially, but I did P Company 3 times in 6 months when I came.
In 6 months.
In 6 months, because I failed, and I completed 3 full P companies and failed the first time, failed the second time, and then passed the 3rd time. And I was on the verge of sacking it after the second P company, because my body, I had all sorts of niggles, and I'm open about it. I was about 85 kilo at 17. I'm a big guy. I've always been a big guy. So the running took it out of my shins and ankles and stuff. I was just spent by the time I come to P Company. And I managed to claw myself through it. So I basically, I like to do things in threes. I don't like to do it the easy way. That'd be boring, wouldn't it?
No, yeah, it would be. You want a bit of an excitement to life. Get stranded in Madagascar. All sorts. And brilliant. And then, 12 years in the fire service, like, incredible. It's a long time to serve in a fire service, because you must have seen some pretty sort of what's upsetting, sort of disturbing things as well as some incredible things. You most probably helped quite a few people along the way. I looked into the fire service once. I wanted to do on-call firefighter. I don't know if they do that where you are, but I lived literally, you've got to live so close. It's ridiculous.
It's about 3 or 4 minutes, isn't it?
I think they were like, I was like 5-6 minutes away, and they're like, you've got to live 3 or 4 minutes. And I'm like, what? I'm like, it's not exactly a large area around a fire station to get people on call, but I never went through with it. How have you found it then? So what's the sort of process of getting into fire service? I think it's quite a hard, tricky maths exam, isn't there?
Yeah, and I've got 0 qualifications. I left school with no GCSEs whatsoever. School wasn't for me. I don't learn. I've got ADHD. That's something that I've been recently, the last 4 or 5 years. I'm not one for labels, but it explains how my brain works. I think a lot of soldiers probably fall into that category. Academically, sat in a classroom being talked at, it goes in here and it comes out here.
Yeah,
you show me something practically. I pick it up near enough first time, how to put up a ladder with the fire service or how to use a weapon system. I'm all over it. It's how I learn visually. So I know and it was a bit of a shock to the system. I'd come from working obviously over in Iraq, being blown up, IED'd, had been ambushed on an occasion before and took ridiculous amount of holes in my Land Cruisers and stuff. So all of a sudden I'm back to being like a Joe bag again on this 17-week recruit course at 33 years of age. So it was a bit, as much as it wasn't nowhere near what the military basic training is for, for the parachute regiment and for, the rest of the units out there. But it was a shock to the system, because I wasn't used to this parading on, bald boots, ironed kit, getting inspected. I was a bit like, what am I doing here? This is not what I kind of thought. I don't know what I thought.
And that's what they had you do.
Yeah. Oh no, it's proper, and if you mess up, you get, you carry the ladder above your head round the drill tower and stuff like that. Again, we're going back 12, 13 years. It's again, I think it's different now, but when you go back another 10 years before that, and it would have been different again. They'd have had you doing all sorts, like generational. But there was still, you got thrashed when you messed up. There's fitness sessions every day. I was absolutely ridiculous. The annoying bit is for this, and this will make you laugh. All the fitness I actually got fitter after I left the paras. I got really into my fitness.
Yeah.
Like I was doing CrossFit, boxing. When I was on the ships, I was training three times a day. So my VO2 max when I joined the fire service was something like 70. Which is that up there with a professional footballer.
Yeah, that's really high.
Cycler. So I was really, really fit cardio-wise. I always have been cardio-wise. Yeah, all that fitness I'd done, week 2 of the fire service training, doing hill sprints, I severely, grade 2, tore my groin. Nearly tore it off the bone.
Yeah.
And that nearly, I had to literally strap myself up. And I had about a week off the training and stood by the sidelines, but I was literally strapped. And since that point at 33, I've never been right since. That leg, I've torn my hamstrings, I've had repeated calf tears, because I wasn't able to give it enough kind of rest and recuperation and get the correct I think I had 16 physio sessions on the groin, and it's still not right. But it was part and parcel. But yeah, answer to your question, the training was very, very, very demanding, and a lot to learn, fire science, classroom stuff, learning about kind of how the triangle and stuff. It is very, very challenging.
And anything sort of really stuck in your mind that's sort of happened? Obviously, if anything too serious, obviously don't have to go into it.
No. I talk about everything. I'm really lucky. I know I kind of do the podcast to raise awareness for mental health, but I'm very, very lucky that in the whole time and the whole careers that I've done, I've never really kind of struggled with it. Whether that's to say it doesn't catch up with me in the future, and this is what I harp on about. I'm very good at managing it through fitness, through kind of walking, through just being aware of my own mental health, But no, there's all sorts. I mean, I've pulled multiple casualties out of building fires, cut multiple casualties out of vehicles, in a dead and alive. It's just a part and parcel. It is a busy station. It's a 1 fire engine station, a 1 pump station in kind of a part of where I live. I don't tell everyone what the service.
Don't name the station. Yeah, that's fine.
But it has poverty areas around it. So with poverty leads house fire, brings on house fires and stuff like that. And there's been a running theme, without kind of going on too much, throughout my whole career from the age of 17, that I always joke about the 9 lives thing. I've had multiple times throughout my career where I've been in the right place and it's kind of death's dodged me, swapping vehicles and with a driver on a particular day just because we did, and then that vehicle got IED'd and that person got really injured, and I should have been driving it. That's gone on throughout my career, and it was no different when my first actual breathing apparatus, where my first house fire, we go into the house fire, we should have gone left, we were told to go left, but it was thick as a bag, smoky, hot, couldn't see, went straight on down a corridor, and then realised we'd gone wrong, came back, turned round, and as we approached through the living room, a massive bag of cylinders and aerosols exploded and blew the kitchen window 25 feet up the garden, blew loads. But if we'd have gone the right way, we'd have walked straight into the kitchen as it exploded, and it would have probably killed us or seriously injured us. So, and that was my first ever breathing apparatus, where I had my diamonds on my yellow fire helmet as to signify I was a probationer straight out of training school. And
is that what you have on, do you?
You have red diamonds on your fire helmet so everyone on the drill yard can see, because you do a 2-year, you do your training course, and then you do a 2-year probational period where you have to kind of go back for assessments. You have to tick off a load of stuff, that you have to do on the drill yard, and you have to attend certain incidents, and you have to be seen doing these things. So you're under a lot of scrutiny for the first 2 years, and I'm a confident person. I was 33, I'd done what I'd done. But I tell you what, there's nothing more daunting than being on that drill yard. When you've got maybe 4 or 5 hairy arse firefighters staring down on you while you're trying to tie a knot or you're trying to use a bit of kit. It's like being 17 again.
Can't imagine just like that first time. You call it breathing apparatus mission or whatever task. Just like going into a building that's just, hundreds of degrees hot, thick black smoke that you cannot see. Like, I don't know too much about it, but I've watched programs on it. I'm really interested to watch and stuff. But I can only imagine that your first time going into that to sort of keep your cool. Like, you go the wrong way as well. Was you leading to go the wrong way?
I had a senior firefighter, who sadly no longer with us, bless him. But he went into the house fire, and it was one of them things. When you go into no one teaches you when you go into the drill house when you're on, like anything, when you're doing drills, you can only do so much to make it as real as you can through drilling.
Nothing survives first contact, does it? So
exactly,
no plan survives first contact. So
yeah, it's the same. It's the same principle. No one knows how they're going to react when you're in that real situation. When it isn't like the movies. You see people run in with rags over their mouth and stuff. You take a lungful of that, you're unconscious. I've been in jobs where the smoke alarms and the plaster's melted off the wall, and it's actually blistered my fire helmet. It's been that hot, burnt the top of my ears. You go down, you crash down. The heat is so intense, and it's disorientating. It might only be up a 2 up, 2 down terrace house, but you cannot see, and it feels like the biggest room in the world because you're trying to walk around it on your hands and feet. You're looking for a casualty. Everything's on fire. It is, but I tell you what, there's not many. The only things I can liken it to is to being in a contact. That's the same sort of buzz.
Hats off to you, because I've seen absolute idiots trying to get around a harbour area at night when they're not in contact.
Yeah.
Right. When you haven't got night vision and you're just like walking around trying to find the rope. Imagine trying to go through a building that's full of smoke. Like you said, extremely hot. And the suits can obviously only protect you so much. At the end of the day, it's a fire, it's heat. So it's going to seep through. And I've seen people get lost. Just wander around harbour areas, wandering around, trying to find the entry and entrance point.
It is.
Hats off to firefighters for honestly. Yeah, soldiers, you go into contact, exactly the same thing, but whether it's firefighter, police, even the prison service and stuff, army, to do any of that really takes some guts and balls. And sometimes you look at people and people judge, and they'll look at him, he's a bit of a fat slob, or they may not look the part. And to be honest, most soldiers don't. But when they get into a scrap, into a contact, or it really kicks off, they keep their cool and they get the job done.
I agree. And, I always leave out that bit. I was a prison officer for 12 weeks, but it didn't really work out. It wasn't my cup of tea. And I was very young, and it was in between working in Iraq. And I felt that red mist closing down where I thought I'm going to end up headbutting one of these inmates if I'm not careful, because some nasty pieces of work. It wasn't for me. But no, the fire service, and we don't look like, as you can see, we don't look like the calendar models that you get on these calendars. Most of us look like gargoyles and out of shape and stuff. I consider myself in reasonably good shape.
Getting a little bit chubby, quite chunky, missing hair, grey beard, and it's not these comb-overs, six-packs.
What do you mean missing?
Yeah, look. But yeah, people think just chiseled abs, nice comb over hair, firefighter calendar model. And it's not.
No, not at all. And you know what? And some of the older seasoned firefighters that are coming up to the end of their 30-year career and that, they go in these house fires, and it's not like you go through the drill, but like I say, like through the smokehouse up at the training school, you do things differently. But it is, and the reason why the training is so intense is so that when you go out and you get turned out to a house fire at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're on it. This flames coming out a window, there's people inside, everywhere, and it's a sight to behold. When you're with a good crew. Myself, I've been on the same watch since I joined. The same watch. There's 2 or 3 people on that watch that we've been together now for 12, 13 years. So we know our strengths and weaknesses. We know how... My fiance is actually a firefighter, Hannah. She's been
Oh,
a
really?
firefighter for 6-7 years.
What, in
We
the
met
same
on
area?
job. Yeah, we were on the same station for me. We were friends first, and then we kind of end up getting together. We were on the same station and on the same watch for maybe 3 or 4 years. And you know what? If you'd have asked me before, if that it worked, it really worked. We got on really well. We worked together.
Good.
We trained together. But she's since moved on to a different station now, and that. So we're on the same shift pattern. So
Oh, that works out really well. So you get the same time off, same downtime, same work time.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so no, it like I say, it's a great job, but it brings its challenges, and sadly people do struggle with the job, with the things that you see and stuff. But it's kind of how you deal with them, and we know the risks when we join the military, and it's the same same sort of thing when people join the fire service. They know what they're kind of going into, but just have to kind of prepare yourself a little bit for it.
Yeah. So with the fire service, which is one thing I don't like, the pay is absolutely shocking. I do know that because I've done my research. It is. You should definitely be paid. You've got to be one of the worst out of all the services. What is the help like? Because the military, it's not amazing, but it is there. You've got free medical, you've got free dental, you've got the psychiatric team and all that sort of stuff in Aldershot and all over. And it is getting better. And there's hundreds of charities. Loads being set up now. You've also got a lot of ex-military guys coming out now, like yourself, which we'll get onto soon, which I really want to talk about is the podcast and what you're doing. I've struggled myself with mental health in the past, and I try and do what I can to raise money. What is there for the fire service? Is there like trim? Is there good treatment? Is there charities out there for you guys?
Yeah, we have a crisis team, and Hannah, my fiance, she's on the crisis team. She's recently gone through part of the course to be part of the crisis team. So we have levels. It's still not brilliant, but it's moving in the right direction. We do have a kind of basic healthcare package that the fire service provide for us, where we can claim claim stuff back for eye tests. Kind of bits and bobs for physio and stuff, but it's only minimum. So, there is that aspect there that helps with the pay. But yeah, it's moving in the right direction when it comes to mental health, and there's a lot of people in there trying to push it. It's kind of, we're moving in the right direction now with decontamination, because we're something, I don't know the statistics, but we're something like 30 or 40% higher risk of contracting cancer because of the contaminants that we deal with in the fire service, with the smoke and the contaminants. So now we're going through a whole series thing where as soon as we come out of a house fire, we bag all our stuff up. It gets sent away for like a proper, wash, or gets replaced. And we shower within the hour where possible, and everything gets washed and everything else. So we are moving in the right direction. So it's still not where it needs to be. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I say that. I think, the powers that be know it, but there is stuff being done to kind of, get better. But look, there's swings and roundabouts. We have a good shift rotation. We don't get a shift allowance, but we do a good shift rotation. But I think if the public knew the things like I've just said about the risk of cancer, and the struggles with mental health and everything else, I think there'd be more cause for saying we should be on better wage, but it is what it is, isn't it?
Yeah,
you don't join in the world.
Yeah, you don't join for the money, just like the army. You can moan in the background about it as much as you want. It's never really going to change, because powers that be, they have complete power about what you get paid. So you just got to get on with it, or leave and get a new job.
Exactly.
But with what you're doing with mental health is absolutely brilliant. And let's really talk about what you're doing now, which you most probably didn't think you would be doing 20 years ago at all, which is putting yourself out there on the internet with your new YouTube channel and podcast, the Old Paratrooper Podcast. I bet 20 years ago, when you were most probably 21, 22, 23, thought this is the last thing you're doing, sitting in front of a camera, talking to yourself and talking to other people.
Yeah, it is. It's a weird bit, and it has been, out of everything I've done, I think this is because everything I've done in the past fits within a certain pattern. Fire service helping.
So I said
people,
you've sort of gone along a route.
Yeah, I think so. Working in teams, high pressure situations, it's what I do. It's like to think what I'm good at, and that's just the way my career's kind of gone. But to do the podcast was like a bit of Now, I'm like, I talk about the ADHD and stuff like that. I'm not one for labels, but like finding out I had it has helped me understand my brain and how it works. And that there's some clarity in that. Once you understand how your brain works, it's like a light bulb moment. It's like, that's why I think like I do. That's why I do what I do. That's why I've done the jobs that I do. So for me, I always need something to get my teeth into. I boxed for a lot of years unlicensed as a heavyweight, for maybe 14 times on the unlicensed circuit. Did pretty well at it. Won a couple of belts that they're sat here.
Yeah, I can see.
And I did all right. I lost once in 14 fights. Fought some really good heavyweights that went on to do really good things. But once I got too old, and I am too old now at 45, I've got more injuries than I wish to, kind of talk about. And I needed something else to channel my kind of passion into, and probably the same as you. I know a lot of guys that have struggled with mental health. I know a lot of guys and girls that have sadly taken their own lives, or tried to take their own lives, or don't know where to turn. And I hear, because we work in these environments where it's TRR soldiers and firefighters, and it's all a bit like tough and you can't speak about things. I wanted to kind of just make it so that it's okay to talk about it. I know that there's a lot of people doing it, but my idea was, if I can get some of these SES veterans on, parachute regiment veterans, people like yourself and me going on your podcast and stuff like that, actors, boxers. My first guest was Lucas Brown, former heavyweight champion of the world. And not all of them have got mental health stories, but some have. And if people can see that and go, well, he's talking about it or she's talking about it, it's okay to talk about it and be open about it and seek help. So every podcast I do, I try and touch on it, explain what I'm trying to do. And more often than not, the guests have got some sort of experience, whether it be a family member or themselves personally, where they can, expand on something. And I find I learn something from every single podcast I go on. I take something away that I can take forward in my own life. So I help other people can kind of do that as well,
Yeah, definitely. People don't realise how many people actually suffer with mental health, especially because it used to be just a big no-no. You didn't talk about it, you cracked on, especially men. But because we are talking about it, we are realising that instead people just used to suffer in silence, as now they don't. They just talk about it, which then helps more and more people, and it's basically a knock-on effect. So like I said, yeah, I suffered with it. Everyone has their ups and downs, and it's good to see sort of people like yourselves coming out and trying to do something about it. And I've seen, I haven't been able to watch all of your episodes yet, but because I've only recently found you within the last few months, I think it is. It's good to see what you're doing is absolutely brilliant. And, what a lot of people don't realise, you are, until you do this podcast, you are a full-time serving firefighter. You've got your shifts to cover. You've got a fiance that you've got to see. And then in the background, you're trying to get guests on. You're trying to talk to them. And you don't really get rewarded for that at the beginning. It's all just done for free in your own time because it's what you care about. It's what you're passionate about, which is really good to see. I know your main focus is YouTube, a lot of it, isn't it? And you're very sort of active on Instagram. But where else, can people find you? What's all your social handles? And then sort of what have you got? What's lined up for the Old Paratrooper podcast? Where are we going?
Well, we've obviously talked about kind of, I want to sort of help promote you. Not that you need the promotion because you're doing really well. But obviously I'm promoting you now. I'm wearing
I know, you got the hat on.
You've
got your patch on your kit as long as it doesn't out as well.
I've got your patch here at the minute. Here it is. Look. So when I go, I've been off for maybe 12 days. I go back to work tomorrow. I should take that and
That's
put that
fine,
on my fire camp. But no, it is, and it's I kind of it is tough. It is tough doing it when you've got a full-time job. I have my kids over twice a week as well from a previous relationship, so they come over. So trying to juggle things, but like you say, I really really enjoy it. And if it helps people, then you get to a point in your life, don't you? I find where I've done good stuff over my life. I'm really content and happy with my life, my house, my partner, my job. It's nice to just be able to be in a position where I can try and give something back and help other people. That's the thing. Where it's going to head, I don't know. I hope it takes off in the future as a business. The money kind of things is not a big, massive push. But look, I'm always honest. I don't have the ability to be anything different than what I am. I tell it how it is. Of course, there's a monetary interest and a business. Everyone's on the lookout to try and better themselves financially. Of course they are, but it's not the main driving force. It'd be nice if I could make a few quid from it. But like I say, the main goal is raising awareness for mental health amongst military veterans, emergency services, communities, and across the board. Anyone that I can help, I will share anything of anyone that helps other people. I just wish there were more people out there that, because you do come up against the negativity where people don't want to help, and I don't get it. And I always say this: I think there's something daft like 8 billion people on the planet at the minute.
Yeah, it is
there's
now,
enough love to go around. There's enough podcasts. What I say on your podcast when I come on yours, it might be a bit different to what I say in someone else's, and it's likewise. There's just enough love to go around and enough support for everyone, especially the veterans community. We all should be supporting each other. But in answer to your question, this is what happens with my brain. I just digress and go off at tangents, so I do apologise.
Fine, no,
all my kind of socials. So I'm on YouTube. It's the Old Paratrooper Podcast on YouTube. I'm on Spotify, same name. I think you can get it on Amazon Music as well. And then I have an Instagram page that kind of feeds the YouTube channel with clips like you kind of do, the Old Paratrooper Podcast. And then I have a Facebook and a TikTok as well that my 15-year-old boy helped me set up because I didn't have a clue.
Yeah, TikTok's a tricky one. So pretty much most of the socials. And it's the same, the Old Paratrooper Podcast. And what are you on now? Is it like 60 eps? I did have a quick look the other day. I was trying to flick through them all.
51 now.
51, that was it.
One out a week. Yeah, one out a week for the last.
Which is brilliant.
It's just ticked over the 1 year anniversary. And you know what? I think I've done all right. I do really well at getting guests, and that's because I like to think I am me. I'm a genuine person. I tell it how it is. I'm a bit of a gobby git and a bit cheeky with it. I take the mickey out of people. I expect you can't offend me. You can take the mickey out of me as much as you like. I give it, I take it. And I'm like that with some of the guests when I'm trying to get guests on. And I think they see a bit of a human side and they like that. And that's why I think I've had the ability to get the guests that I've had on, and I've still got quite a few in the background and in the locker to put out. Great guests, Frank Zane, who was Arnold Schwarzenegger's inspiration to start bodybuilding. He's in there. There's loads, and it was always my ambition or my goal as well to, as much as it seems sometimes that I go away from the military veterans, I have these big celebrities on sometimes, but I always go back. I wanted to get the following up and the subscribers up and the views up, and then I can really give the veterans the justice because I've already got that following. I didn't want to sort of immediately go straight for veterans with amazing stories and inspiring stories, and then no one see them. So the idea was to build the following, and then hopefully then I can infiltrate more episodes with veterans with truly brilliant stories.
No, that makes sense, definitely. And the merch, the t-shirts, you do sell some of them, don't you, as well? If people do want to top and support yourselves in that way, I think your logo is brilliant. Absolutely.
Well, that was
brilliant.
down to the fiance.
Highly recommend. Was it?
Yeah, she did that. She does all my thumbnails. Bless her.
She does your thumbnails as well.
Yeah, she does my thumbnails. She helps me with them. And I kind of, she designed the logo and stuff. So she's amazing. But no, the merch, I'm not in a position yet. It's probably something I probably need to talk to you off air about, is how I go about that, because I just do sort of 3 or 4 orders, bulk orders every year. People come to me with orders, and then I get them. I'm a novice to all this, but there is merch out there. There'll be an order going in very soon. So.
It's a good way of doing it. If it works for you for now, it's a good way of doing it. And just to let people out there know that, like you said, you're not really in it for the monetary sort of side at the minute, but just that little bit of income, we're both here, to be honest, does, even though we've got full-time jobs, that, that money's going towards bills. You are spending a few hours a week, if not longer, and you've got to try and make up that time. And, You've got your wooden plaque in the background. You've got the setup. You've got the mics. You've got the headphones. You want to upgrade kit in the future. We'll all be honest. Like I said, it's taken me from where I started with YouTube to where I am now. Simple things to the upgraded computer I've got, the mic, headphones, everything. It does cost. And if you want to put out great quality content at first, it's just quantity. Just get it out. Just let people hear your story. But at some point it is nice to upgrade. So if people can support in other ways, buying merch, possibly gifting money, or you grow a following and you start making income, it does help. So if you're doing 3 or 4 orders a year, then absolutely brilliant. So people should definitely send you a message on Instagram if they do, because I think your logo is brilliant. A million times better than mine. So honestly, hats off to your fiance.
I've said to you before, I'm a big fan of your merch. When I got one of your caps and the patches and stuff like that, I'm a big fan. And like I say, I'm thankful of your support. For the last couple of months, you've been very, very supportive. So I really, really appreciate that, and it doesn't go unnoticed. Hopefully, we continue to work together and support each other as we move forward, pal. So
always, I'm the same as you. Whether mainly veterans, we stick together, we help each other. But I'm all out for anyone if they want to shout out of anything across my socials. I always, try my best to do it. But thanks for coming on. Absolute brilliant chat. We've been chatting for an hour now. It's been absolutely brilliant. So cheers, mate. Please go and check out the Old Paratrooper Podcast. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. He said he's on Facebook, Spotify and Amazon Music as well. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Thanks for having me, pal.
Cheers.